I am very pleased to have with us in studio this afternoon Mr. Bill Heavey, the author of the brand new book, It Is Only Slow Food Until You Try to Eat It. The subtitle, Misadventures of a Suburban Hunter-Gatherer. Bill, thank you for your time, sir.
Happy to be here.
This is a fascinating concept for a book. When we think about foraging, when we think about finding food on our own, we automatically think of these pristine vistas and virgin forests untouched by man. You're traipsing around right outside of our studios almost in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And what was the idea behind this book? What was the real driving force here? To see how much you could get here?
Not really.
Okay.
The original, it actually goes back to what you were talking about early on in the show. The first time that I hunted and killed a deer and ate the meat that I had cut myself from that deer, I had this kind of, aha moment. I was eating this meat, and there was nothing between me and the meat. There were no layers. Nobody had inspected it. It hadn't been in a feedlot. Nobody trucked it. Hadn't been in a grocery store. Had never been on styrofoam under fluorescent lights.
Right.
It went from the field. And it felt almost subversive. We're so cowed and so used to having all these layers and all these people saying, yeah, that's okay, that's not okay, but that's okay, but this we're not sure about. There was none of that.
Right.
And it actually felt subversive to do that.
I know
but
exactly.
I like that subversive feeling.
Yeah. No, it's almost like you're getting away with something you're not supposed to be able to do, and then you realize, no, this is actually how things have been throughout most of human history.
I actually wrote an article. I said, I felt this sort of Promethean thing. I had stolen food, and an excerpt of this book appeared in the New York Times, and somebody commented, "You didn't steal food. We're the ones who are stealing food. You got your food. You got your food honestly.
Right.
It's the rest of us who are stealing food." But you touched on something else. Anatomically modern humans, people that, if they were dressed like us, would look like us, have been around for about 200,000 years. For 95% of that time, all but the last 6,000 years, when agriculture started, we were all hunter-gatherers. That's how we survived. And we're all the descendants of those hunter-gatherers. And we're the descendants of the successful ones, because the ones who weren't good at it didn't get to pass on their genes.
Right.
So, and one of the things that I discovered in myself from hunting and also from foraging was the feeling like that we have these neural pathways in ourselves that are latent, but we don't, only some of us activate them. And when they're activated, it's an intense thing, and you start to feel like, we're hardwired to do this.
Yep, absolutely. Around here, I would say most D.C. area residents, the closest they come to that is when they, stumble upon a new cupcake store and new cupcakes, they get that rush. Yeah. Imagine that times 1,000, and you don't have to go in and pay the sales tax and everything. So what prompted you? Because I got to say, I've lived in this area for a long time, almost a decade before I decided, I can't do it anymore. What made you decide, I want to see how much I can get here? Or is this a good place to forage, to try to fend for myself?
It sort of started off that way, and I pretty quickly found out, I could get enough stuff to survive, but it would be pretty dull. I would be eating venison and stinging nettles and, a couple of other plants that you can get in great abundance. I could survive,
right,
but it would be pretty dull. So I branched out. I began looking for people for whom getting their own food was not a stunt, was just part of their everyday life. And so this led me to some really interesting people. I went hunting caribou with some Gwich'in Indians up in northern Alaska. I'd never heard of the Gwich'in. They're a tribe of the interior. And they were nomads as recently as 100, 150 years ago.
Wow.
And their oral tradition tells them that they've been following a single herd of caribou for 20,000 years. And they still practice subsistence hunting. And so I went hunting with these guys, and they were just astounding. I went with this guy, Charlie Swaney, who was one of the chief hunters in the village. And if you're a good hunter, you bring back, and part of your responsibility is to share the meat, and with those most in need, children and women, just like you were talking about.
Nobody complained about Charlie's caribou not being inspected by the USDA or anything?
I don't think he had a special bathroom in his house. But they were amazing. And to see people that are that connected to nature makes you realize how much we've lost, and how most people, it's sort of a double loss. We've become disconnected from nature, and we don't even know that we've become disconnected from nature. It's like an unknown in the Rumsfeldian sense.
Right.
We don't even know.
We don't know what we
lost.
don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to see people like this who were connected was mind-blowing. I mean, I was seeing things. This guy would wake up in the morning and smell the air, and somehow he knew what the caribou, 60 miles away were doing. And he was right enough times that I believed.
Right. And that's the thing. It's not that this guy had superpowers. It's just that he has the knowledge and the experience, and he's been doing this so long that this is second nature to him. If we had lived the life that Charlie has lived, presumably, if we were really good, presumably we would be just as good. We too could have these types of abilities. And so I got to ask, last question before we take our first break: have you developed any skills, any superpowers, Bill, in the course of your hunting and your foraging experiences?
Well, it's changed. I've become more attuned to things, and I go out. I pick around here. There are wineberries that are just. It's a non-native raspberry, but it's been here for quite some time, and they grow all over the place. And I collect those now, and I freeze them, and I keep them. And I get mulberries, and I go out and pick. If I'm making eggs, I'll go get some dandelion greens and throw those in the pan and saute them up. So it's not superpowers, but it's changed me.
Talk with Bill Heavey, author of the book It's Only Slow Food Until You Try to Eat It, Misadventures of a Suburban Hunter-Gatherer. The book, as I understand it, Bill, has a little bit of everything, and even a love story, right?
That's true.
This is cool. Can you tell us a little about this?
One of my teachers in this area is a guy who works at the Pentagon for the NSA, and on the weekends he does primitive skills and incredibly knowledgeable about wild plants. And he was, incredibly generous with me. He taught me, agreed to help me and teach me what he knew. And one day he said, I went on a wild plant walk this last weekend in Baltimore. Interesting woman. I think she'd be a good source for you. And I said, sure, okay, thanks. And, I sort of wrote it off because I had him and he was good. But he sort of kept after me. And he said, you should talk to her. And I was like, yeah, okay. And finally he said, and she's a real peach. And that afternoon I began emailing this woman, Michelle Guino, who lives in Baltimore and is a photographer and writer and sort of wild edibles teacher. And went from there.
Wow, that's so cool. See, you never know what you'll find
you
when
never
you
know
start
what you
foraging, right? So if people, and what I love about this is that if you can do this in the Washington, D.C. area, you really can do this anywhere. If there are people who are curious, who want to know, like, how do you get started, looking around your area? I mean, what are some tips that you would give
Well,
them?
you get a guidebook first. And, the Peterson's Guides, there's a Peterson's, I'm not sure the exact name, but it's Peterson's Guide to Wild Edible Plants. There's some fantastic books by a guy named Sam Thayer, who has 2 books out. And he really just lives it. And every plant that he talks about, he gives you the full deal of here's when to collect it, here's how to collect it, here's how to process it, here's how to cook it, here's how to eat it, here's what to watch out for. So those are 2 good sources.
Okay, and it's very important you get the timing right. I mean, I know that we found fiddlehead ferns this spring, probably about a week too late to find fiddlehead ferns. We thought, well, you know what, we'll just saute them in some, but Awful, Bill.
But
Just
this was
awful.
this was one of the big realizations. You know, I was a child of the suburbs.
Right.
I grew up going to Giant food store, and there were no seasons. You could always get whatever you wanted
Yeah.
at Giant. And when my mother would stop at a roadside stand, my sister and I would look at each other like, you know, why is she doing this? They got all the stuff at Giant, and there are no mosquitoes, and there's candy. So, you know, let's go there. But then you start picking stuff in nature, and you realize ripeness is incredibly fleeting in nature. You get there a day too early, a day too late, you missed it.
Yep.
And, you know, we forget that.
You're right, and I think we're going to actually see more of this going forward. I think that we, you know, in this country, certainly you have some Americans who want to be taken care of, but we also have a lot of Americans who have experienced that joy and that satisfaction that comes with being better than you started out the day being, and to push yourself, and whether it's, you know, the DIY mentality of being able to, you know, fix your car and fix your home, or the you know, empowering ability to go out and provide for your own food, whether it's again starting your own garden, living in the city, or foraging, or taking up hunting. You know, we're actually seeing more people who are city dwellers become hunters now too.
Sure.
And they're saying, all right, I can't do it in the city, but I can still live in the city and go out and hunt.
And all of the things that you're talking about are ways of being connected to the natural world. And we are one of the things I found out in the course of this book is we as humans are most intensely ourselves when we're connected to the natural world. And so anything that does that, you know, whether it's growing a garden, hunting, fishing, foraging, enriches us. And you know, the Gwich'in Indians just blew my mind. I keep coming back to that because one of the problems now that they're having is the boys in the village, they don't want to go out and learn all this stuff. They want to play video games.
Right.
And so I heard Charlie dressing down his nephew, who had one day they'd been up on the tundra, and the boy said he was going back to get some more bullets, and instead he went back into town to play video games. And Charlie was talking to him, and he was saying, look, we're worried about you. You're not going to know how to take care of yourself when hard times come. If you don't learn this stuff, you're going to be like those guys who leave the village and go live in an apartment in Fairbanks. And as he was saying this, it struck me. To him, you know, to the Gwich'in, once you're removed from these acts of hunting and gathering, you are literally a lost soul. And so to go live in an apartment house, to him, these guys were absolutely, in the most concrete and literal sense, lost souls. They were like zombies because they had the Gwich'in know and define themselves by being out there hunting and gathering.
And by removing yourself from that,
You
and
cut
not
yourself
being able
off from
to.
that,
Wow.
you're nothing. Who are you? You know,
yeah,
tell me. You can't. You don't have an answer for that if you're Gwich'in.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, we would think of this as becoming more civilized or becoming, you know, a bigger part of society by moving to Fairbanks, but it's all a matter of perspective, you know,
Absolutely, yeah.
because you're removing yourself from another society. Well, listen, Bill, I cannot wait to tear into this book. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this
My
afternoon.
pleasure. Thank you.
Bill Heavey joined us. It's only slow food until you try to eat it. Next time you need an assistant, you're in the area, let me know. I would love to go on an adventure with you.
Will do.
All right. Thank you
deal.
so much.
You bet.